Hi everyone, it's Sandy with Animal Education and Rescue. So good to be here tonight with you. I'm going to see who comes on. I know this is a unique topic and it's not common or typical, so I'll see if anybody comes on for this. I'm happy to share my information that I have about birds, but I need to see if anybody comes on. I see Mary's on. Let's see. Anne's on. Hi, Anne. Okay, so we'll see if, we get some people on. I'll give it a minute. And then I'm going to talk all about birds and bird ownership, bird care, at least from my perspective. I'll give you a little background on how I know anything about birds, and we'll go from there. See if I can answer any questions for anybody. We'll see who comes on. I was hesitant. Hi, Connie. I was hesitant to do this live because I didn't know how many people would be interested in learning about birds, because I know that's a unique kind of pet that is actually not that common. So, hey, Colette. I miss seeing you tonight. We'll have to get together soon. So Sandy's here. Okay, so we're getting some people on that obviously there is some interest in learning about birds. And so we're going to talk a little bit about birds. But I want to give it just one more minute in case anybody comes on just a minute late. You had parakeets as a child, Sandy. Okay, so did I. So, we should be able to get through actually quite a bit. Hopefully I can give you some perspective on birds, and then I would definitely encourage you to share this video with anybody. I'm hoping Connie can figure out how to actually pull this off of Facebook and maybe put it on our website. I'm not sure if we know how to do that, but we're going to give it a go if it has enough, meat in it to be able to share with other people. So I think I'm going to get started and tell you a little bit about my background with birds. As with Sandy Washer, who's on tonight, I grew up with a little parakeet named Tippy, Tippy. And so I had a bird growing up, and I remember that Tippy lived in the den and lived for many years with us, and he was never outside of his cage, and we just looked at him in his cage, and that's all I knew about birds at that time. But when I was 16 years old and I moved in with my dad away from my childhood home, and things were pretty difficult at my dad's house. My dad was kind enough to allow me to get a bird. And so my first personal bird I got was a cockatiel named Buddy. And Buddy was from a pet store, a local pet store. He was not hand tame. He was actually pretty wild. And I didn't know the difference between a hand-tamed or wild bird. And so that was quite an experience taming him. And since I had Buddy, I moved actually back in to my mom's house when I was 17. And my mom, the only animals that my mom would allow me to have besides our dog that we had, and at that point Tippy had passed away, was she allowed me to get birds. So I kept getting birds. And so as a child, as a teenager, I had numerous birds. I had little parrots, conures, cockatiels. I didn't have any parakeets at that time. And I had quails for a short time. So those were the birds that I had when I lived with my mom. And then I actually ended up getting a parrot, a orange-winged parrot. And then I got married and moved in to our house, Chuck and I, into our first house. And with us came our two birds. He had actually adopted a bird before we were married, and a little conure, and I actually had a parrot named Quincy. who I had adopted before we got married. And so we ended up coming into our marriage with a parrot, a tropical bird, well, 2 tropical birds, and a conure. And actually we had a lot of birds. We had a little parrot. I had lots of different birds. So that's enough of that. And since that time, we have had quite a bit of birds. I would say in the last 7 or 8 years, I'm dating myself, we have not had any birds, but before that, I mean, I had so many birds, both that I owned and that I also fostered and adopted out throughout the years. Mostly tropical birds like parakeets, cockatiels, lovebirds, parrots, and so forth, and Quaker parrots, and just all different kinds. So what I want to do first is I want to talk about tropical birds first, because tropical birds are probably the most popular around here. So we're talking about parakeets, which are really popular, and cockatiels and lovebirds. Those are the 3 that you'll see a lot of times in pet stores. And sometimes, depending on the pet store, you might see parrots in the pet stores. Now, let's talk about hand-raised birds versus birds that are not hand-raised. Okay, so hand-raised birds basically means that once the bird is hatched from the egg, that a human being hand-raises the bird, possibly right from birth, or, at a short time after that. And so that way, the concept is that the baby bird sees that the person that's feeding it as their mom and sees that people are good, and it does make for a much more friendly pet bird if you have a hand-raised baby. Now, typically at pet stores, you're not going to get that with parakeets or cockatiels. You're not going to get that with the little parrots that they might have, the sun conures, those kind of things. They might not be hand-raised. Hand-raised birds are a lot more expensive than the ones that are just raised by their actual, bird mama. So you're going to pay a lot more for a hand-raised baby. The bird craze that I think was happening maybe 15, 20 years ago is starting to kind of die out a little bit. And that's because people are realizing the amount of work that birds take to take care of. Now, I will say right off the bat, with all the experience that I have with birds, and my personal opinion is that I do not believe that birds, particularly parrots or conures, those kind of birds really, or macaws or cockatoos or African greys, those kind of birds should really be pets, to be honest with you. What we're doing is we're taking an animal that flies, and that a big part of what makes them happy is flying, and we're putting them in a cage, and we're putting them in a room, and we're putting them in a house. And if we're here in the Midwest and these are tropical birds, then 6 months or more out of the year, they have to be inside. And if you're a diligent, good tropical bird owner, then in the warmer weather, supervised and, not in direct sun, the bird can be outside with in a cage. But, none of it is ideal, in my opinion, of having a bird as a pet. I think that it is really hard on them. And also the other thing that you want to consider when you get a bird, if you get a little parakeet, they live, 7 to 15 years, something like that. The bigger birds, the macaws, the parrots, the cockatoos, they can live 75 years or more. And I can tell you just from personal experience that my life has changed a lot. When Chuck and I first got married, our lives were very different. We didn't have children. We were young. We just had a different life than we do now. And so if you think about it, if you get a big bird, a cockatoo or a macaw or whatever that lives 75, 85 years, they're likely going to outlive you. And also your lifestyle is going to change a lot. I had a little parrot. I named him CW. And CW was like this big. He was a little parrot, but he had all of the qualities of a parrot. He was able to walk upside down. He was very clown-like. He was very affectionate. And when I first got him, it was before I was married, I spent a lot of time with him because I had a lot of time to spend. And so he went everywhere with me, and he would sit on my shoulder, and he'd go underneath my hair, and we had just this fabulous relationship. And time moved on, I got married, and then I had children. And this bird who had demanded so much attention from me started getting less attention from me because I just didn't have the time to give. And over a period of time, he spent more and more time in his cage. And it's something that I have to live with the rest of my life, knowing that that bird who was everything to me, in the end, ended up being in a cage way more than he should have. And so what we want to think about is, when we talk about pet birds, is are we able to handle it for the long run? And are we able to give them what they need to live a life that is at least enriching what would be natural to them? So I'll give you an example as well right now that we have. We have two rescue birds right now, two parrots. And one is a blue-front Amazon named Tutu, and the other one is Quincy, who is a orange-wing Amazon. And Quincy is the one that I've had since before I got married. So we're talking about 29 years. And Tutu I got after I was married. Both of them are rescue birds. And I've had both of them, 28 years, 29 years, whatever it is. And Tutu and Quincy, our lives have changed so much. I mean, we raised 2 children already. We've run numerous companies. Logistically, where we've lived has changed. They were in a different house, and now they're in this house. And we give them run of the room that they're in because we feel bad, and we do not clip their wings. We allow them to fly around. But in all reality, I want you all to realize that they've kind of destroyed that room. It's our choice to let that happen, but we do that because we feel bad that really they should be somewhere warm where they could fly all the time, and they can be in trees, and they can't be. So, and we also have them together so they have each other because we don't have time to spend one-on-one with them. So if you're going to have a tropical bird, you have to consider the length of time they're going to live. A parakeet living, or a cockatiel living, let's say 7 to 12 years, and then a bigger bird like a macaw or a parrot living, 70, 75 years, is what is going to happen in your life during that time span. And the other thing you want to think about is, what kind of space do I have in my house to be able to take care of these birds? So keep in mind, you need, depending on the size of the bird, you need a cage that would be appropriate for the bird. And so, like for instance, with the parrots that we have, that room, a big portion of that room is devoted to to those birds. So you have to say, is there a room in my house, if I want a big bird, that I can devote to that bird or those birds? Can I do that? Can I devote to them that space? I mean, that's like a whole room. This is like a room that could be a den if we wanted to use it for a den, but instead it's the bird room. Okay, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to keep digging deeper and deeper into this. Okay, so I know there's a lot to go over in a very short period of time, and I know there's a lot of resources online as well, and I'm telling you my perspective. So daily care for a tropical bird depends on the bird. It depends on if it's a parakeet or it's a cockatiel or it's a lovebird or it's a parrot or whatever it is. So one thing I can tell you for sure is that giving them seeds alone, which is what you're going to find in the pet store, is not enough. you have to offer the bird human food as well every single day. That's really, really important. So they need to have that in their diet. If you think about it, if they were flying around outside, they wouldn't be eating seeds, just seeds. They wouldn't be doing that. They would be eating fruit from the trees. They would be eating probably some bugs, possibly, things like that. So we always have for our parrots a variety of vegetables and some fruit available for them. Parakeets, little birds, obviously you want to cut things up according to the bird, and also keeping in mind that each bird is different on what they like and what they don't like. And there are certain things that birds can't have. There's certain types of things like raisins, avocado, there's other things that birds can't have. So you want to make sure that you also read up on what birds can have and what they can't have. There is a vet in Niles Animal Hospital that is very knowledgeable about birds. There's also some bird food that some people really like, Dr. Lefebvre's bird food that is supposed to be like a formulated diet for birds. And so certainly you can look into that. I would definitely, just like if you had a dog or a cat, I would suggest to you, because I can't spend the whole time we're talking tonight to talk about diet, but I can tell you that it's really, really important that you make sure that your birds have a well-rounded diet, keeping in mind that it might, if the bird has been used to eating seeds only from wherever they came from, it's going to take some time for them to adjust to eating other kinds of foods as well. And of course, they need to have water at all times available to them. So that gives you a little bit about that. So as far as caring for them, feeding them, and having a cage that is big enough, also, this is just my feeling, and everybody can choose what's right for them, but I believe, I used to, years and years ago, I used to clip my birds' wings so that I could take them out on my shoulder, so that I could have them around the house and they can't fly anywhere. It also is supposed to tame them more, so it's supposed to make it so that they're more bonded to you. They won't be less likely to obviously fly away from you. So there's a lot of pros, and that was the reason that I clipped the wings of some of the birds that I had in the past. I've changed my personal view on that simply because of my view of birds in general. Now, let's just say, bottom line is that there are birds in rescue that need rescue. So we have no choice. They can't go out in the wild. But moving forward in the future, I really don't think that birds are meant to be pets. I really don't. That's my opinion. Don't send me hate mail. Please don't send me hate mail. That is my opinion. Same as that I would not want to live in a boat on the ocean. I'm a land animal. I would want to be able to walk on the earth. So birds have wings for a reason. And so that's my opinion. But there always will be rescue birds that need to be rescued, so that can't go out into the wild. So thus the reason we're talking about this. So in other words, what I would suggest to you is not to, if you're thinking about getting a bird, please don't go to a bird breeder and get a hand-raised baby, okay? Please don't do that. And if you're planning on going to a pet store and getting a little parakeet because you think it would be a good company for you, or for, you know, someone in your family, whatever, do understand that even little parakeets, they need to get out of their cage to fly around. They need attention, they need love. And this is the thing too, and kind of what spurred this on of me doing this this live, is that I had someone comment on, you know, when we took in these 15 parakeets recently, is that parakeets should be only birds because otherwise they won't bond to their owners if there's more than one parakeet. This is the thing, everybody, okay? This is the logical thing you have to think about, is you want to say to yourself, if this bird is a year old, do I have the next 15 years? Do I know for sure that I can commit for the next 15 years to be this little parakeet's best friend? That I can take this parakeet out of the cage every single day, give it the attention and love it deserves, have it walk around on my shoulder, love on it, you know, pet its little around here, you know, do everything that I need to give it the socialization it needs because that bird is going to be tremendously lonely if you can't spend the time and be its best friend. So if you think that you can't be, that you want to have birds, or let's say you're rescuing like we are, we're rescuing birds. Well, we had 15 parakeets, okay? So I would rather adopt them out in pairs, and I'll tell you why, because at least the parakeets would have each other. The likelihood that the typical individual for the next 15 years is going to be able to take that bird out of the cage and give it one-on-one attention, you know, put it on its little parakeet stand and have it sit while you're doing the dishes and, you know, walk around with it on your shoulder. All the things I did when I was a teenager when I had more time, okay? We don't have time for that. If we're raising children, we're busy with our work, we have other animals in our house, you know, whatever we're doing. So that's why when you're getting little birds like cockatiels or parakeets or lovebirds or whatever, I want you to think about, can I give that bird enough attention that I can warrant having that bird bond exclusively to me? That's the other thing, is that especially the bigger birds, they bond to one person typically, okay? And what happens if that one person is no longer around? And also another interesting fact too is that typically the big parrots usually bond to either males or females more. In other words, they might like men or women better, which is kind of an interesting phenomenon with parrots, is they usually like one or the other, and oftentimes they bond to one individual. So again, you know, I want you to think about the long term for these animals. Now, and we're just assuming that we're rescuing only, because there are animals, there are birds that need rescue. People that got them from breeders or didn't know what they were getting into, or the owner died or whatever, and then the animal's in rescue. Or in the case of these 15 parakeets, it's somebody that's deciding they're going to breed and breed and breed and breed and sell and breed until they get sick and tired of it, and then they had 45 parakeets that need homes. So anyway, that's a little bit about that. And I'll get into like doves and quails and pigeons in a little bit, but most people have tropical birds. That's been my experience. Okay, so back to the care of the tropical birds. So we talked about feeding, we talked about water, we talked about having a big enough cage, we talked about allowing the bird out of the cage every day to fly around. Now keep in mind too, if you don't know anything about birds, birds poop. And if you don't clean it up immediately, it is seriously like glue. It's like spackle. It's horrible. It's very hard to clean up. It's just a nightmare. So birds are very messy, dirty animals. It's very difficult. I don't know how to do it, to train a bird to go potty in a certain area. If somebody knows how to do that, hey, more power to you. I don't have that kind of time, nor do I know anything about that. They're very messy, very, very messy animals. And so you want to keep that in mind if you're going to let them fly around. Is in an ideal world, is that you need to make sure you clean up the poo before it dries, okay? Just kind of a gross fact, but it's true. Also, if you're feeding human food, which you should be doing, in the warmer weather, you might get bugs, you might get fruit flies and things like that in your house. And there's these little annoying moths that sometimes comes in the bird seed, if you have bird seed, and it could be annoying too. So keep in mind, you're going to have those kind of problems. And right, Heidi says the bigger the bird, the bigger the poo. Absolutely. So keep that in mind. Okay, so, and then once again, let me touch on clipping birds' wings. Clipping birds' wings was used as a tool to tame a bird. And certainly if you think about it, if let's say somebody put us in a wheelchair, because our legs are what, for most of us, how we get around and how we express ourselves. We go walking, we go running, we go biking, we get out of the car to go to the grocery store, you know, whatever it is. If somebody took away our legs and we could no longer walk, we would be much more dependent on people. So with clipping wings, you're basically taking away their ability to fly. And again, it's something I used to do, but it's something that I totally am opposed to now, and I don't believe in doing that anymore because I just don't, okay? and that's just how I feel about it. And so that would be something that you need to decide and really read about the pros and cons of clipping birds' wings. Let's see. The bigger the bird. Okay, Connie asks, when did humans decide that birds should be pets? I don't know the answer to that, to tell you the truth, Connie. That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to. I do know that in the, let me think, the 1980s and 1990s, that birds were smuggled in from other countries and other places in wheel wells of cars and in suitcases. Some of them died, some of them didn't. They were captured and smuggled in and then sold in pet stores. And I had heard about that. That was in the, let me think, that was early 1990s. I had heard about that happening, and I found out about these birds that actually had been smuggled in and were going to end up at pet stores, and they were absolutely terrified. These were like wild birds that were smuggled in, and I took those birds in and I hand tamed them, and because I knew they couldn't go back out into the wild. They were in the Midwest, unless I wanted to travel to some tropical country or something to drop them off. And so I hand tamed them, and then I found them new homes. You know, so I know that was going on, that people were taking them, were stealing them from the wild, and then giving them to pet stores, or no, selling them to pet stores, and then pet stores were upping the dollar, making money off of them. It was a racket. It was terrible. So I know that happened, and I don't know other than that. But I do know for as long as I've been alive, birds have been pets. Okay, so let's see. Also, some practical things that you should know about birds too is that their nails need to be clipped regularly, and their beaks may need to be filed, may or may not. It depends on the bird, and it depends on how well it takes care of itself. They also have cuttle bone, which is like this. It's shaped like this, and it's like it's like a white chalky kind of thing that you put on the cage, and the birds can use it to actually file down their beaks a little bit. And another thing I want to mention too about birds is that with any what we call exotic pets, and birds fall into that category, not every vet will actually see a bird. So the number of vets that see birds in any area is going to be much smaller. Thus, the dollar amount that you're going to pay as a client is going to be higher. So they can demand a higher dollar amount for taking care of your bird because there isn't as many vets doing it. It's like, so they have cornered the market in a way. So keep that in mind as well, is that if your bird gets sick, injured, you want to take it in for nail clippings, or the beak, or, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's going to be expensive because not every vet handles birds. So, and that's another thing, is that you want to realize too, that your bird, you might live in, let's say, Libertyville, but you might have to go, travel a little bit farther to go to a vet that would be appropriate for your bird. Luckily, actually, in Libertyville, we do have some local vets that treat birds. There's Care Animal Hospital in Libertyville, and then I know Fox Lake Animal Hospital has Dr. Harris, who works there one day a week. We've used him. Actually, the parakeets that we took in recently, there were 15 of them from that defunct breeder, and 10 of the 15 or so had what's called mange, and it's like mange, and it was on their nose. You can see it's like a scaling on their nose, and so they need treatment for the next month for it. And actually Dr. Harris over at Fox Lake saw the birds and gave the medication to them. So, and Dr. Harris has been practicing for eons. And of course there's Dr. Lefebvre over at Niles Animal Hospital. He is the most, from my understanding, one of the most well-known in the suburbs. And then there's also an exotic pet place in Chicago that I've never used them, but I've heard good things about them. So that is that. Okay, does anybody have any questions so far? I'm going to just touch just a little bit on the other kinds of birds as well. Does anybody have any questions? So I will say basically is that, you know, my suggestion to you, if you don't have a bird and are considering getting a bird, is to do rescue only. Do not get a bird from a breeder, because we don't want to perpetuate the breeding of birds. In my opinion, they need to be wild. But they, unfortunately, there'll always be people that are not, you know, thinking of the big picture, and that just want a bird, and they're going to go to a breeder. So the breeders are going to stay in business. Hopefully not as many of them, but there'll always be birds in rescue because of it. So if you're looking to rescue a bird from like a organization like ours, don't get it from a breeder, and keep them in business, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about other birds, which I have limited experience with, but I think it's worth talking about. And the other birds I'm talking about is like, and you'll see them sometimes in pet stores, is doves and quails, particularly doves. There's different kinds of doves. And then pigeons I want to talk about, because we've had our share of pigeons and doves and quails actually in our organization. And let's talk about doves first. Doves, there's different kinds of doves. There's ringneck doves, there's diamond doves. Okay, so we've had both of those particular breeds of doves. And so the diamond doves are very small. They're like this big. They're so cute. And they're really, they have a beautiful singing voice that they have. Oh, let me just go back real quick to tropical birds' singing voice. Okay, they're loud. Tropical birds are loud, especially parrots, macaws, and cockatoos. So you have to keep that in mind. You don't want them somewhere where you have to be on the phone a lot, or where a baby's sleeping. They are very loud. Okay, so back to doves. So diamond doves have a great singing voice. It's just so sweet, and they're so soothing. Diamond doves they're not going to be like parrots that climb around on your body and, you know, are clown-like and monkey-like. They're going to be much more the kind of bird that you're going to just have a big aviary for, and you're going to let them just be in groups and fly around. But you got to be really, really careful with diamond doves that you don't let them breed. So keep females with females, males with males. We ended up with, I think it was 9 diamond doves, because the person that had them just kept letting them breed, and they breed like crazy. They're like rabbits. They breed like crazy. So you want to make sure to get either a male or female. And even if you don't put a nesting box in there, they can still breed. So typically if you put a male and a female together, the rule is that of any bird is that if you put a nesting box in there, they will breed. If you don't, they won't. And you can just throw the eggs out if they're at the bottom of the cage. I don't know. All I can tell you is diamond doves breed like crazy. So if you're looking for a bird that you can have a big space that they can fly around like in a big aviary, and where you just want them to, be able to look at them and enjoy them, diamond doves might be a good choice. Ringneck doves, which we've had those too. Ringneck doves, they need to be able to get out of their cage to fly around. If you want to get a rescue bird, I would highly recommend for a first-time bird person to consider a ringneck dove. Actually, they are much easier. Like for instance, tropical birds, typically tropical birds have a hooked beak, and they can, when they bite, they can actually really hurt you. I mean, they can really like tear into your skin. The bigger ones can actually break your fingers if they're not tame. Doves are just gentle birds. They're gentle and sweet. They've got a great energy. They have a beautiful voice. They're not really loud and annoying as tropical birds can be. They don't scream. and they have a cooing sound they make. They use doves in magic, or they used to use them in magic for a reason, because they're so easy to work with, because they you can handle them really well. So if somebody really wants to rescue a bird, and they've never done it before, and they want one, doves are not going to live 75 years. Doves are going to live 15 years or so, typically. So that might be a good first bird for someone, or only bird or whatever. And you can certainly get them in pairs. I would recommend, again, unless you're going to spend one-on-one time with that bird, they should have a friend to be with as well. Pigeons are another type of bird I just want to touch on briefly, just because I know a little bit about them. We've taken in some pigeons, and pigeons, there's a whole culture out there of people that are pigeon people. These are, you've heard of homing pigeons. It is fascinating. If you're into birds and you want to kind of explore what might be good for you, there's hobbyists that are pigeon people. These are people that have racing pigeons, homing pigeons, and these are people that train their pigeons to actually fly home. And they have pigeon races. And it's nothing bad. It's nothing bad. Obviously there's bad owners of anything, but from my understanding is that they're very well taken care of. And that's kind of a sport, and not a bad sport, not bad for pigeons. It's actually okay as long as obviously you take good care of them. But it's really fascinating because people really get into their pigeons, and pigeons are very gentle animals, and you can hold them like you can doves, and they can be kind of fun to watch. We've had a few pigeons in our care as well. There's something, I wanted to mention too with tropical birds, not doves or pigeons, but tropical birds, is you want to really be careful of the cold weather. And that's another reason they don't make great pets, is that you have to be really careful of drafts. So your pigeons, your tropical birds can't be by a drafty window, they can't be in the wintertime. You have to make sure that they have a heat source. So our birds in our office, in our one room, which was an office, actually they have a heater in there, and the heater is available and on at a certain temperature year round, because they have to stay warm and they can't get a draft, because if they get a draft, they can get very sick, and they can get sick easily, and they can die. The other thing you need to know about birds in general is that you've got to be really careful what cleaners you use in your house. You cannot use perfumes or sprays in the air. Oh my gosh, so bad for birds. You can't use anything with fumes. You don't want to use bleach around them. You don't want to use any kind of Pine Sol. There are so many things. See, because birds have pores everywhere, and they absorb everything into their system much more. Not that we don't have pores everywhere, but they're just very sensitive to smells, and it's very toxic to them. So be really careful with birds, with any kind of perfumes or any kind of anything. Smoke. Oh my gosh, you don't want birds around smoke. You don't want them around cigarette smoke, cigar smoke, or any other kind of smoke as well. Okay, so Heidi says Teflon. Yes, Teflon. Right. So that's another thing. So you don't want to use nonstick cookware around birds, because it emits this kind of toxic fumes that could really be bad for birds. Yes, any kind of candles, lead wick candles. Actually, I would just stay away from candles in general. Just don't take any chances. Right. Those are all very good points. So as you can see, tropical birds particularly are very, very fragile animals. And if you're going to adopt one, be very conscientious of that. if you're going to adopt a little parakeet or something like that, I want you to think, or a cockatiel or what, it doesn't matter, but just know too, if, especially like we have the 15 parakeets, if you're only going to get one, do you have the time to devote to letting that bird out of the cage every day, to play with it, to cuddle it, to talk to it, to spend time with it? Or is it better to get a bigger cage for the parakeet and have more than one parakeet, so that way the parakeet has company and is not alone? I think it's really tragic when a parakeet, you see these parakeets in these small cages that are not big enough for them to fly around it, and they live there by themselves 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To me, that's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking, and shouldn't be that way. I'd rather see them in a much bigger cage and have more than one parakeet, so that way they have each other. So thank you, Heidi. Good points, very, very good points. Let's see. Connie says, when my daughter went to Montessori way back when, I volunteered to take care of the class birds during one of the holidays, went to feed them. Got there and they were all dead at the bottom of the cage. The cleaning crew used something I guess they hadn't used. Oh my gosh. Oh, see? That's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm telling you. It's just, they're very fragile. They're not supposed to be pets, everybody. These poor tropical birds, they're meant to be in the trees, in the wild, somewhere warm, not here in the Midwest. But that's not the case, and we do need people to rescue these animals. Just understand what you're getting yourself into, and understand what your limitations are, and understand that your life is going to change as you get older. You know, life changes. And parrots particularly, I mean, you know, I'm committed to Quincy and Tutu, the parrots that we have in the office, but let me tell you, it's a pain in the butt. It's a pain in the butt. Chuck built these gorgeous bookshelves, and he put together these, they're just gorgeous, and the birds have destroyed it from chewing on the wood. That room is not usable for anything else right now because the birds are in there, you know, so it's, you know, it's not ideal for a lot of people. So just keep that in mind. And I know, Heidi, you have birds as well. I've heard, when we've talked on the phone, I've heard them screaming in the background. And that's, you know, something else you really need to keep in mind is when they decide to get into a scream fest, they're going to scream and it's going to hurt your ears. The one bird we have now named Tutu was actually a rescue because the previous owner said to me, you have to take this bird. The screaming, I'm afraid I'm going to do something to hurt the bird. And so, of course, I took the bird. But I could see that it could be maddening, the screaming and, you know, what they do. So if you're going to get a bird because you want the experience of a bird, you know, research it, learn about it, realize that most birds are not going to be easy, and you have to be committed to that bird for life. And depending on how long the bird lives, a little bird like parakeet or lovebird, cockatiels, you know, I don't know, 9 to 15 years, whatever, 7 to 15 years. But those big birds, they can live 75, 80 years. So, you know, depending, I mean, you know, if you want to rescue one, hopefully you can find one that's 50 or 60 years old. And then maybe you only have it 25 years, something like that. Does anybody have any other questions at this point? I know I covered an awful lot in a short time. Awesome. So Anne says, I love the rescue parakeets I got from Sandy. I'm still working on taming them. That's awesome, Anne. And I'm glad that you got more than one. And so I think that's important. And that's great that you're working with them. And I'm sure you're letting them fly around and get exercise. And they can be really fun animals to watch. They can be very comical and entertaining. And I love their little, they don't have this scream like a parrot. They have a very sweet, you know, singing voice. And I have fond memories of my parakeet growing up. Tippy, I wish he had had a friend. in hindsight, but I was a little girl, I didn't know. So that's great. I'm glad you rescued them, and spread the word, everybody. We do still have, I don't know, 10 or so parakeets, I'm guessing, that need to get adopted. And like I said, you know, adopting them in pairs would be great, and making sure that they have a nice big cage is great. But they are available for adoption, and you can go to our website and learn more. And of course, I encourage all of you to go online and read more about birds and decide whether they're right for your house or not. And it's understandable if you decide they're not. And if you want to get one, again, remember, please rescue. Don't get from a breeder, and don't get from a pet store. Please don't get from a pet store, because then we're perpetuating the breeders, breeding them, selling them to pet stores. So please go to rescue if you're going to get a bird, and do not go to a pet store or a breeder. Okay, I'll give it another minute and see if anybody else has any other questions. So the next live I'm going to do, an educational live, is going to be on cats and dealing with peeing and pooing outside the litter box. That's a really good topic, and it's something that I come across often in the world of rescue, where people want to give up their cats because their cats are going potty outside the box. So I think that's a really good topic to talk about. And let's see what else. We have a big adoption event coming up on Saturday at PetSmart in Vernon Hills from 12 to 3. And I am going to be giving away some of my books, The Animal Warrior, in observance of Prevention of Animal Cruelty Month. It is my gift. And there is an entire chapter on birds. And I talk about my childhood birds and some of my experiences. And so the book is called The Animal Warrior, and I will be there with some of our adoptable animals from 12 until 3 on Saturday. Come early if you'd like to get a free book. It's a limited time. After that, I will be selling them at half price until 3 o'clock. So load up on the books and give them as gifts. And let's spread the word and educate people. And it's a great book, and it's very inspirational, and I think you'd like it. So I guess that's it. That's what we got going on. Thank you so much for joining me tonight on Facebook and learning all about birds. Okay, we'll talk soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.